Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is another Ukraine War Update Extra, where I give you the extra nuggets to fill in the holes around your understanding of the war and to give you some greater context and just points of interest as well. Or I can just fog it up even more, who knows. Yesterday, I showed on my video, and you have to see this. If you haven't seen yesterday's video, go and check it out now, Ukraine War Update Extra. That showed a clip from Julia Davis translating a section of a Russia Today program that had their director of broadcasting, or maybe deputy director of broadcasting, talking to someone else and just expressing the most evil, fascistic, psychotic opinions, just disgusting opinions, otherizing Ukrainians and basically calling for Ukrainian children to be drowned and burned to death. It was horrible, right? But this is on national TV. And there was a bit of an uproar around the internet to the point where RT have suspended this guy. Okay, so let me just go through this a little bit. Host of Russia's state-funded broadcaster RT was suspended Sunday after he made calls on the air to drown or burn Ukrainian children who viewed Soviet Russia as an occupier. So the way he did it was also egregious. So he was smirking and laughing and just, it was horrible. Anton Krasovsky's remarks on his RT show broadcast Thursday sparked widespread outrage over the weekend. Ukraine's foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba, accused the Kremlin-controlled channel of aggressive genocide incitement. It's exactly what it was, 100%, and advocated for a global ban of RT. So RT is banned in some places, but even in the UK, it's not outright banned. I think the carrier is not allowed to show it, or so technically it's quite difficult to watch in the UK, but it's not banned, and that's my understanding. But it should be, carrying stuff like this. So as the Ukraine's foreign minister says, governments which still have not banned RT must watch this excerpt. This is what you side with if you allow RT to operate in your countries. Aggressive genocide incitement. We will put this person on trial for it, which has nothing to do with the freedom of speech. Ban RT worldwide. So the director of broadcasting, Anton Krasovsky. Anyway, he's been suspended. For saying children should be thrown straight into the river with a strong current, burned in a hut. And they were talking about, using a prod to just keep them down and drown them. It was all pretty horrible. Well, not pretty horrible, horrible. His comments came in response to an account by his guest, Russian science fiction author Sergei Lukyanenko, of his encounter with anti-Russian children during his visit to Ukraine in the 1980s. The segment containing Krasovsky's remarks has been deleted from RT's social media accounts. RT's editor-in-chief, Margarita Simonyan, distanced the broadcaster from Krasovsky's disgusting comments and said she was stopping our collaboration for the moment. For the moment. Once everyone forgets about it, he'll be back. Just there you go. Perhaps Anton will explain what temporary insanity caused the controversial statement, Simonyan wrote on the Telegram messaging app. Krasovsky later issued an apology, saying early Monday that he got carried away on the air. I apologize to everyone who was freaked out. I apologize to Margarita, to everyone who thought the comments wild, unthinkable, and insurmountable, he wrote on Russia's Vkontakte social network, so on and so forth. The idea that you can apologize for that and say you got carried away, like you're on national TV advocating the murder of children on account of their ethnic background, and you smirk and smile and laugh while doing it. That's no getting carried away. You are just that. Those are your opinions, mate, and see ya. You have no place on any national television broadcaster unless that nation is a fascistic, morally heinous nation. So, make up your own conclusions there. So now we have, but here we go. Let's have some more. Meanwhile, in Russia, genocidal denials of the Ukrainian identity from the host and his guest. They claim the Ukrainians are just mentally ill Russians whom they will cure once Russia wins. They propose destroying all Holodomor memorials, they discuss killing Americans. Watch. And again, this is 8 minutes long, so I won't show you, but here's a little bit of a taste.
Здорово, рад тебя видеть.
И я рад. Прекрасный у тебя флаг за спиной, да, православие, або смерть, Россия или смерть. Мы так и думаем. Но вот мне точно там не хочется запугивать людей там историческими аллюзиями на Карибский кризис, но я не могу избавиться вот от каких-то ассоциаций, что это сильно смахивает на очередной Карибский кризис. Поэтому и спросил тебя, вот есть ощущение того, что мы увидим в прицелы настоящих живых американцев, а не только...
I presume the Caribbean crisis is reference to the Cuban crisis of 1962 and the fact that nuclear missiles were almost used several times.
Вот этих вот наемников.
Вполне возможно, что а чего нет? Почему НАТО не может вести войска? Почему нет? Ну почему? Что им? То есть у них есть все. Да, это будет большая для нас большущая проблема. Но а что делать? Не привыкать. Будем сражаться, будем воевать, будем убивать врагов всех тех, кто идет на нашу землю. Почему-то это вызывает у них коробит некоторые, когда я говорю убивать. Ну, может, кто-то думает, что на войне развлекаются чем-то другим. Вот. Но вот мы будем убивать американских солдат.
А ты думаешь...
And he's talking about coming to our land as if people are coming to Russia. That's not what's happening. You've gone into Ukraine. And there's this confusion and narratives and the idea that you know, this will then allow for NATO to come in and invade Russia. So well, even if that did happen, which is not going to happen, you got to think, well, you guys started it. You know, and then they're going to, but no, you guys 2014, and then it gets back into that whole debate again. But no, you guys invaded a sovereign nation.
Объявляет глобальную войну Западу открытую, да, ползала спит, и просто, ну, я чувствую, что люди не понимают, что врагов надо убивать. Все то, что они забрали у нас, надо отнять назад. То есть это нужно делать решительно и бесповоротно, не озираясь ни на какие правильно бесполезное международное право или еще что-то. Поэтому, конечно, будем сражаться. Будет очень трудно, я сразу говорю. Очень трудно, потому что если Украине передавали какие-то натовские новинки, то уже НАТО, если зайдет, а НАТО обладает этим оружием, уже она обкатана, этого оружия будет больше. Ну, будем воевать, что делать? Противника не выбирают. Ну, то есть надо,
в конце концов, если афганцы смогли победить, то уж русским сам Бог велел. Давай исходить из этого. Ну вот продолжает вот...
That's fascinating. So if the Afghans can beat NATO, then we can. You know, but of course the Afghans beat Russia. Russia failed in Afghanistan and pulled out, you know, famously so. So this is just fascinating distortion of reality.
Относительно врагов, мне кажется, вот это философское понятие враг и кто наш враг за 7 месяцев так никем и не было проговорено, потому что наши начальники по какой-то, не вполне объяснимой причине этого стесняются. Вот, то есть на разных уровнях произносят регулярно ритуальные мантры про один народ.
Что такое украинцы? Я вдруг понял. Украинец — это заболевший русский, который... Это как трансвестит, да, вот он родился мужиком, потом у него что-то произошло, он сделал себе операцию, он стал вдруг жить, захотел стать женщиной. Вот он на себя, или он берет на себя, одевает платье, одевает парик, красит губы и ходит так по городу, да, и выглядит это немного странно. Ты думаешь, мужик это ли? Да это ж мужик, да нет, это баб, это, да, то есть украинство — это такой духовный, это русский духовный трансвестит, который вот влез в какую-то, и он пытается влезть в другую шкуру, понимаешь? Мне всегда было интересно, где этот момент, когда они перешли, да, вот это от здравого вот русского, южно-русского человека, да, скажем так, к вот какой-то, абсолютной шизофрении. Поэтому будущее Украины, будущее людей, которые живут, безусловно, это русские люди, которые вернутся в свое нормальное состояние. И когда мы победим на Украине, то, конечно, будущее этих людей — это русские люди, вернувшиеся в свое из сумасшествия, вот этого духовного трансвестизма, в нормальное состояние.
What an interesting simile there, figurative language and choice of comparison says probably quite a lot about the ideology going on here. But Yeah.
Легко сказать, трудно будет сделать. Вот, ну невозможно же отрицать как бы вот эту степень ожесточения.
Уйдет шизофрения, и все, тогда и у нас в первую очередь уйдет, и тогда мы сможем вылечить соседей.
This talk about curing neighbours as if this is some kind of, I've just gone a bit nuts, I just believe in my own sovereignty, but all it'll take is you guys to come along and just, I don't know, change my mind through a bit of open conversation or perhaps just overt propaganda and brainwashing over a series of generations. But, it's just like, seriously, come on, grant other human beings with a little bit more humanity, self-determination and intelligence.
Захар Прилепин увидел прекрасную новость с соответствующим развернутым комментарием в городе-герое Мариуполе с помощью эскаватора в циничной демонстративной форме снесли памятник Голодомору. А таких вот и памятников Голодомору и других элементов украинского очень много.
Да, безусловно, чтобы перепрошить назад, конечно, должны быть уничтожены все, ведь эти все памятники, эти культовые места, да, именно все монументы, установленные с 91 года.
A complete, disappearance of the cultural identity of Ukrainians and Ukraine is what he's asking for. He's asking for it to be erased. Ukraine needs to be erased culturally and historically from the history books because this is Russia. And it's Russia because I say it's Russia. They don't get a say over who they are. I get to define that, says this guy. They're Russians. If they want to claim they're Ukrainians, a bit like as he calls a cultural transvestite, if they want to claim that they're taking on this fake persona, I have the truth, and they will reject that fake persona if we can just actually brainwash them into accepting that they're Russian and not Ukrainian. And we're going to destroy all their monuments and cultural history.
Которые бы касались независимости Украины, ее новой переделанной истории, должны полностью уничтожаться.
А для того, чтобы всерьез говорить о том, что Украина замерзнет этой зимой, а я так абсолютно уверен.
I love the fact he doesn't challenge that at all, this guy. He's like not going to challenge that at all. Obviously, he pretty much agrees, but let's talk about Ukraine freezing over winter.
В том, что Украина должна замерзнуть этой зимой. Надо бить, бить, бить и бить, причем бить по электросетям. И вот тогда нет, война не закончится. Более того, война не будет выиграна. Но война, по крайней мере, встанет на те накатанные рельсы, которые в конечном счете обязательно приведут нас к победе. Беспощадная к врагам.
I guess it's okay to call it war now?
Война. И вот тут я выхожу опять на тот же самый философский вопрос, который по какой-то необъяснимой для меня причине никто из известных, влиятельных лидеров общественного мнения, спикеров, не хочет проговаривать, не хочет обсуждать. Невозможно победить украинство как идею, если ты не формулируешь контр-идею. Понятие «русский» не этническое, это понятие политическое, это понятие имперское. Много можно придумать каких-то слов, метафор, которые описывали бы эту идею, но ее нужно начинать описывать, о ней нужно начинать говорить, что мы хотим принести, что мы хотим построить, как называется это место, эта земля. Этой земле нужно дать новые имена. И Дугин 100 крат прав, когда говорит о том, что для того, чтобы победить Украину, нужно победить Украину в себе. Нужно победить Украину в себе. Вот эту вот агрессивную, фашистскую, человеконенавистническую идеологию западного либерализма.
He's calling Western liberalism fascism and then advocating for or fascistic imperialism and erasing of other countries. Just absolute confusion of ideas and politics and philosophy, grasping hold of anything to advocate his own position, which is basically the destruction of an enemy state, Ukraine, that should be part of Russia. And in order to do that, I'm going to sing the praises of imperialism again and accuse Ukraine and its allies of being fascistic, because then it doesn't make me look fascistic.
Реализма предстоит извести во всех ее проявлениях. Они бесчисленны совершенно, они пронизывают всю нашу жизнь. Их предстоит извести здесь, и только тогда мы победим.
He says using technology of Western liberalism and the free market system that has broadly allowed that. You know, just it's just a one big mess of ideas and contradictions. But there you go, fascinating stuff that just shows these Russian propagandists and TV thinkers are just terrible human beings. There you go. Okay. Let's move on. Russia has now just flooding informational space with fakes about what Ukraine intends to do to blow up the Kharkive dam, both Kharkive and Dnipro dam, dirty nuclear bomb at Kherson, blow up all 6 units of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, and dirty bomb and the same script at Khan Shaykhun as well. So you're hearing all these theories coming out where they're flooding the informational space, as they say here, and then this is often seen because it's often becomes true that it's a false flag operation in the making. So, Ukraine are going to do this, they're going to do this, going to do this, going to do this, going to do this. And when one of those things does happen because Russia have done it, then they can claim that Ukraine were going to do it because they've already thrown out that disinformation so successfully. There's a lot of talk about this concerning the Novokakhovka dam. So there you go. Something to think about. This is what remains of the missiles and rockets that the Russian army has been firing at Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkive, for 8 months. Can you imagine the terror? So just check out the collection of these pieces of munition, pieces of ordnance, stuff that's been used against this Ukrainian city. And they've collected it all together just to show you the sheer volume of this stuff. It's absolutely phenomenal. See some of that from the air again, do we? No. So again, just going back to there, just absolutely insane. The sheer terror of all of those raining down on you at different times. Okay, let's move to Kherson. The shelves in the shopping stores, I reported this, that gas stations are appearing to be empty. These are shelves in Kherson supermarket, just entirely empty. It's assumed that delivery of food to Kherson city has stopped entirely. This city only waits for its liberation, and all sides, whether openly or silently, know that. That drama will end soon, says Tendar. So that's just an interesting insight. It's reported by local media that Russians began to dismantle the monument to Admiral Ushakov in Kherson a little bit earlier today. One Russian propaganda channel wrote a list of valuables that need to be looted in Kherson. Number one position there was a monument to Ushakov, so that one. So this is advocating essentially war crimes. The most valuable books, values of Kherson Philharmonic Orchestra, values of the Puppet Theatre, values of the Kherson Region Tholo Academic Musical Drama Theatre, exhibits in the Art Museum, exhibits in a regional museum, church valuables during the defense of the city. Icons must be given to the troops, and then that monument up there. And, you know, the 9th one was at the risk of surrendering the city, evacuate the remains of the Prince Grigory Potemkin Tauridi. Just, it's so blatant. The war crimes are blatant because people all over social media and on television, as you've seen, are advocating war crimes. They are saying, let's do war crimes. And then war crimes happen. And like, well, yeah, it's just a complete normalization for the Russian population. Moving sideways, Russian Air Force. And this is just someone on Twitter saying this, but I think this is a quite interesting list here. So the Russian Air Force has been flying in combat for over a year. Started training for war in July of last year. Many of the best mechanics are just tired. Parts have been used up. There is no time for unit of depot maintenance. So, there's not enough time for maintenance, which you can see by crashing planes possibly. Air crews are tired and burned out. More and more losses means that current aircraft have to fly far more to cover lost aircraft. The Russian Air Force is not the Soviet Air Force. It's a small air force overall by the numbers of miles they have to cover. Many aircraft are 40 years old. Of the parts they have, many are made up by cheap contractors to save money, and there is corruption. Enough said. And lastly, flight hours. The Russians are not getting many, and it shows. And this is a point that was made right at the beginning of the war, before the war started. There was talk about how, and the same has been said for like artillery training, that they only get to fire like one live shell for a crew a year they're given or something. Whereas NATO forces, American forces just do far more. But particularly with the air forces. So American Air Force has to do X amount of flight hours per year to keep their training up. But the Russians are required to do a mere fraction of that. I can't remember the numbers, but the Russians do a mere fraction of flight training and get their flight hours compared to American, UK, NATO forces. So they are not well trained, and they don't keep that training up. And then being thrown into a war where you're flying this often, it's no surprise you start seeing planes fall out of the sky for all the reasons just mentioned. And that is a challenge for the Russian Air Force, for sure. Here's just a random, because I haven't shown you pictures of anything getting blown up. Here's, I think, a BMP that's been hit. But what's interesting about this, so the Ukrainians coming past it, and it's been hit from behind. So I just thought it was interesting, is it running away? Why is it being hit by either an anti-tank munition or a tank? Why is that being hit from behind? Does that signify a movement away from the front lines of Russian forces? Ukrainian 79th Air Assault Brigade destroyed a Russian BMP with an anti-tank mine. I've shown you a few mines and hits, and mines come in different shapes and sizes and forms. There are some that bounce up and then come down and land on top. There are ones that actually trigger like a mini rocket firing from the side. And there are ones that you drive over, and all variations thereof. So here's one of a Russian vehicle not lasting very long, and this is how destructive mines can be. And I've talked about how mines aren't necessarily designed to blow up vehicles. I mean, they're obviously designed to do that, but you set a load of mines out not in the hope that you necessarily blow them up, but to slow down Russian forces, because if you then know there's a minefield around, you have to clear it before you can move. So there are some mines that get fired from rockets or fired from shells, and they then spread out and land in different places, just randomly land around. And then these mines have to be cleared, and it's just a really good way of delaying. Last thing I'm going to go through is a thread on mobilization. So more unhappy mobilized Russian soldiers deployed to Ukraine have spoken out about a chaotic mobilization that has left them on a front line in eastern Ukraine with no training, no usable weapons, no food, no water, no orders, and commanders they feel are lying to them. This is a long video, nearly 27 minutes, so I won't upload it here. It can be viewed with automatic subtitles on YouTube. The link is below, but I'll post a summary and some extracts below. The Mobics say they are men of the 15th Motorized Rifle Regiment of the Taman Division, 2nd Guards Motor Rifle Division, which is based in the Moscow region. They were mobilized on the 28th of September. By the 8th of October, when the video was made, they were near Liman in eastern Ukraine. So that is 10 days. So they were mobilized, and 10 days later, they're in Liman. After being mobilized, they were taken to a location in the Belgorod region, probably the Soloti training range, where, quote, we were placed in a tent. There was no training, absolutely no allocation, nothing. Quote, the officers were just holding their hands up and saying that we were not expecting you at all. So they were given weapons and ammunition indiscriminately in a chaotic place. Quote, where shells were lying around, ammunition in general was unloaded right on the first day on a Kamaz, and Kamaz trucks were just crushing them in the mud. Just insane. One soldier complains that the weapons were, quote, lying in storage boxes in absolutely unserviceable conditions. It was all covered in mud, meter-thick layers of dirt, rains, I don't know, just complete as if probably anti-storage. In other words, there were just boxes in which were lying damp, wet assault rifles that were so rusty they looked as if they had already burned and continued to rust. There is absolutely no seriousness and no organisation. Another says, you cannot even go into battle. There was also no training. They were, quote, fed breakfasts, told to come back tomorrow on each day they were supposed to be training. One soldier says they were, quote, constantly being fed the lie that we were going to have some kind of training. So the men themselves were not in good shape and they had received no physical training before deployment. Some of their group were in a poor physical condition. That made them unable to deal with the physical demands of being in the field. Quote, we have healthy guys, but there are also those who, if you will excuse me, will not be able to pull 15 kilos of equipment, excluding an assault rifle, ammunition and shells. A personal backpack with all its equipment weighs approximately 20-25 kilograms. I don't think everybody can run with it, especially considering the fact that we didn't even have any physical training. We haven't even run with it once. So as a result of the lack of training, one soldier says, all sorts of specialists have not been properly trained. Some have not even seen a combat vehicle. They do not even know how it functions and how it is started. So their only weapons practice session seems to have been put on for show when Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu was visiting for a day. Quote, we had firing on that day when Shoigu came to the Naro-Fominsk firing range. We had it exactly on that day. Their existing military specializations were ignored. This seems to have occurred for many of the mobilized. They were moved around between bases in Western Russia, apparently randomly, before ending up at a mobilization site for tank crews, despite being riflemen. At the tank base, quote, the commanders were selecting people. That is, if you are good at driving vehicles, either you are good at shooting in vehicles, or you are a scout, or you are a sniper. Simply, you are a mechanic. Get out, go here and there. You are a tank man now. They were moved on after their commanders worked out they'd been sent the wrong group of mobilized men. Quote, they got us up at night and told us that we had taken you to the wrong place by accident, so pack up all your stuff and go somewhere else. A further problem was that money promised by the government didn't turn up. The soldiers say they were promised a salary of 250 to 300,000 rubles, $4,000 to $4,800 a month, but it, quote, all turned out to be a fake. Instead of paying salaries in cash, which has been the usual Russian military practice until now, the men are being paid via electronic cards. But we still have not even seen our cards. The cards are useless anyway, as here in the fields, you don't run to ATMs to banks. The lack of cash is a critical problem, as the men are having to buy their own food from a local shop. We've not been fed for 2 days, says one speaker. Another says there was no water, there was none. Meanwhile, they are in debt from having to buy their own uniforms and equipment in Moscow at hugely inflated prices. They complain that, quote, everyone continues to cheat us, and appeal to the esteemed prosecutor's office to pay attention and do the math. So that was what commanders tell them to do. Just, sort it out yourselves. And I reported on that previously. The Moscow city government under Mayor Sergei Sobyanin was supposed to have provided the men with body armor and helmets, but they say we have not seen our equipment, which suggests that they have been sent into the battlefield without any personal protective gear. The men say the senior officers provide no information and are lying to them about what's going on. You go up to an officer to ask for specifics about where, what, and how, and no one says anything. We have a huge suspicion of the higher reaches of government commanders and so on, because they say one lie, but in fact another thing happens. Despite all of this, the men say they do not want to discredit the Russian army and completely support the war effort. Bit of self-protection there, maybe. Quote, no one refuses to defend their homeland. However, they say that they want to call attention to their lack of preparedness and maltreatment. Since arriving at the present location, they say, we have been fucked for 2.5 days. The last 10 minutes of the video appears to be secretly recorded conversation with the men's superiors, likely the colonel and major, who alternately placate and berate the disgruntled soldiers. Some of the complainants appear to be junior officers. You behave very stupidly. one man, likely the colonel, says, and warns that the men are now in trouble for complaining. You were behaving childishly in some kind of rebellion today. He compares the men to the mutinous groups formed in the Tsarist army during World War I. Guys, in 1914, the Soviets were set up, just like you said, and they overthrew the Tsar. I'm telling you frankly, you're not going to overthrow the Tsar, which is Putin. I can't influence anyone's fate at all because I'm just like you, the man says. In other words, he's in the same situation. The soldiers had to accept that, quote, the combat situation sometimes just forces all sorts of even clever generals to do this. I'm not talking about dumbasses throwing, as you say, meat, but this is the army. This is war. The junior officer, platoon leader, points out that the men who assigned to operate the gun on his BMP-2s aren't trained and don't know how to avoid the 7 ways in which their weapon could fail. The disgruntled officers are reprimanded for demoralizing their men. So on and so forth. So that's a fascinating insight into the mobilization, the problems that these troops could cause when they hit the front lines, and would they be more of a burden than an assistance to the already existing troops that are there. Anyway, there you go. Lots to think about. I hope that was of some interest to you. More of this stuff tomorrow. After I do my maps update, I will give you another Ukraine War Update extra. In the meantime, if you want to support my channel, please do so. Thank you very much for liking, subscribing, sharing, buying me a coffee on anything you do or nothing you do. Just watching is obviously brilliant. Thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Toodle pips.